Hello lovely viewers, welcome to my channel SROMA Stories. Today the subject and the review is the stone which the builder has rejected. My name is Esther and this is my story. Growing up, I often wondered what it feels to be someone's favorite child. I never had that experience. My father made it painfully clear that I was a disappointment simply because I was born a girl. He had hoped for a son to inherit the family business, and from the day I could understand words, I heard him say, "A daughter can never carry a man's legacy." Those words stayed with me. My two elder brothers were treated like princesses. They received the best education, expensive gifts, and endless praise. And I, on the other hand, was expected to cook, clean, and stay out of important conversations. Whenever I offered an opinion, my father would dismiss me without even looking into my direction. My mother loved me deeply, but she rarely defended me. One evening I asked her why she never stood up to my father. She held my hand and said, "Sometimes people are blinded by what they expect to see. One day they will realize your worth." I wanted to believe her, but every passing year made it harder. After finishing secondary school with excellent grades, I begged my father to let me attend uni. He didn't even think about it. "I'm investing in your brothers," he said. "You will get married one day. That's your future." His decision crushed me, but it didn't break my spirit. I started selling homemade snacks in the market, saving every coin I earned. At night, I studied using borrowed books and applied for scholarships without telling everyone. Months later, I received the letter that changed my life. I had won a full scholarship to study business administration. When I showed it to my father, he barely glanced at it. "If you leave this house," he said, "don't expect me to welcome you back." I packed my small suitcase that evening. As I walked away, I whispered to myself, "The stone the builder rejected may still become the cornerstone." At that moment, I had no idea those words would mean or how it would define the rest of my life. University was nothing like I had imagined. Whilst many students had their parents paying for their everything, I learned to survive on my own. My scholarship covered tuition, but I still had to find a way to pay for food, transportation, and books. I worked weekends at small cafe, tutored struggling students, and sometimes skipped meals just to save money for my expenses. There were nights I questioned whether I had made the right decision. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered my father's words. Instead of discouraging me, they became my motivation. During my final year, our lecturer announced a national business innovation competition. Hundreds of university students would present ideas. The winner would receive funding to start a real company. My classmates hesitated. I signed up immediately. For weeks, I worked tirelessly on a business plan that focused on helping small farmers connect directly with buyers instead of relying on middlemen. Many people thought the idea was too simple to succeed. The judges disagreed. When my name was announced as the winner, I stood frozen. I couldn't believe it. The prize included enough funding to launch my first company. The local newspapers published my story, calling me the young woman changing agriculture. Ironically, one of those newspapers found its way into my father's hands. For the first time in my life, he called me. I stared at my phone as it rang. Part of me wanted to answer. Another part remembered every moment he had made me feel unwanted. I took a deep breath before picking up. Hello. There was silence for a few seconds. Then he quietly said, Esther, I think we need to talk. I never imagined those words would lead me to the truth about my family and force me to make the most difficult decision of my life. When I answered my father's call, I expected another lecture or perhaps another attempt to take credit for my success. Instead, his voice sounded weak, almost unfamiliar. Can you come home? He asked. I hesitated. The home I had left years earlier was the same place where my dreams had been dismissed. Still, something in his tone made me agree. When I arrived, I noticed my father looked older than I remembered. He invited me to sit down, but neither of us knew how to begin a conversation. Finally, he cleared his throat. I have made many mistakes, he admitted. I believe your brothers would protect this family, but I was wrong. I remained silent. He continued. After you left, I had handed over almost all the family businesses to your brothers. They promised to grow it, but instead they borrowed huge amounts of money, neglected the workers, and spent the profits on expensive cars and luxury vacations. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The business is collapsing, he said. Suppliers have stopped trusting us, employees are leaving, and the bank is threatening to seize everything. He lowered his head. I rejected the one child who truly understood responsibility. For the first time in my life, I saw tears in my father's eyes. He looked at me and whispered, Esther, I need your help. His words stirred emotions I wasn't ready to face. Part of me wanted to walk away and let him experience the consequences of his choices. Another part remembered the values my mother had taught me: compassion, humility, and grace. I left the day without giving him an answer. I needed time to decide whether I could help the man who had spent years convincing me I wasn't good enough. For several days, I couldn't stop thinking about my father's request. Friends encouraged me to let him deal with the mess he had created. They reminded me how he had humiliated me and refused to support my education. Then I visited my mother. She smiled sadly as she held my hand. Your father was wrong, she said. Very wrong. But don't let his mistakes determine the kind of person you become. Those words stayed with me. A week later, I returned to my family business, not as a wounded daughter seeking revenge, but as a businesswoman ready to rebuild what was falling apart. The situation was worse than I had imagined. Financial records were incomplete, unpaid bills had piled up, and many loyal employees had already resigned. My brothers blamed everyone except themselves. When I proposed change, they laughed. What makes you think you can fix this? One of them asked. I looked him in the eyes and replied, because I'm willing to do the work you refused to do. Over the next several months, I negotiated with creditors, rebuilt relationships with suppliers, introduced transparent financial system, and listened to the workers who had been ignored for years. Slowly, the business began to recover. Customers returned, profits increased, the employees regained hope. One afternoon, my father gathered the entire staff. Standing before everyone, he took a deep breath and said, "I had waited my whole life to hear this. I spent years believing my daughter could never carry family's legacy. I was wrong." He returned towards me and tears in his eyes. "Esther, you are the cornerstone of this family." At that moment, I finally understood the meaning of the verse that had carried me through the darkest days. The stone which the builders rejected had become the cornerstone. The rejection that once broke my heart and became the very foundation of my greatest purpose. Although the businesses are recovering, peace had not returned to the family. My brothers could not accept that the sister they had always looked down on was now leading the company they nearly destroyed. Instead of admitting their mistakes, they began working against me. They questioned every decision I made, spread false stories among the employees, and even told suppliers that I was planning to sell the business. That goal was simple. They wanted me to fail. One afternoon, I walked into my office and found important contracts missing. At first, I thought they had been misplaced, but one of the accountants quietly told me he had seen one of my elder brothers remove them from my desk. I confronted him immediately. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. He folded his arms and replied, "Because this company should belong to us and not you." I looked at him in disbelief. It was never about being a man or a woman, I said. It was about who was willing to protect what our parents has built. He laughed and walked away. That evening, I met with my father. I placed the recovered documents on his desk and explained everything that has been happening. For a long time, he said nothing. Finally, he looked at me and said, "I have spent years defending your brothers simply because they were my sons. Today, I can no longer ignore the truth." The next morning, he called a meeting with the entire family. With trembling voice, he announced that I would become the company's managing director. My brothers would remain shareholders, but they would no longer control its daily operations until they proved they could act responsibly. My brothers stormed out in anger. As I watched them leave, I realized leadership sometimes requires making painful decisions, even when the people you love don't understand them. Months passed and the company continued to grow. We expanded into new markets, hired more employees, and created opportunities for young people in our community. For the first time in many years, the business was stable. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. It was my elder brother. He stood quietly at my office door, looking nothing like the proud man I had known. "I owe you an apology," he said. I invited him to sit down. He admitted that jealousy had blinded him. Watching me succeed has forced him to confront his own failures. Instead of learning from them, he had tried to bring me down. "I thought Dad loved us more," he confessed. Now I realized he was trying to correct the mistakes he made. A few days later, my younger brother also apologized. It wasn't easy for either of them, but it was sincere. My father gathered us together one evening. With tears in his eyes, he looked at all the three of us. I spent years measuring my children by their gender instead of their character. He said, that is the greatest regret of my life. He turned towards me. Esther, you taught me that true strength isn't found in being a son or a daughter. It is found in integrity, wisdom, and the courage to do what is right. I hugged him for the first time in years. In that moment, I let go of the bitterness I was carried for so long. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it gave our family a future. I finally understood that sometimes the people who reject you are the very ones who will one day recognize your true worth. Looking back on my journey, I realized that the greatest victory in my life was never becoming the managing director of our family business. It wasn't the awards I received or the respect I earned from people who once doubted me. My greatest victory was refusing to let rejection define who I became. Today, whenever I meet young women who believe they are not good enough because someone underestimated them, I share my story. I tell them that other people's opinions are not the final words on their lives. Sometimes the very people who reject you are unknowingly preparing you for the greater purpose. My father kept his promise to change. Before he retired, he officially handed the business over to me and publicly acknowledged that I had saved not only the company, but also our family. Hearing those words healed a wound I had carried since childhood. For my brothers, our relationship was never perfect, but it became honest. We learned to respect one another, and together we worked to make the business stronger than it had ever been. My mother often smiled and said, "This is the family I prayed for." One day, I framed a simple verse and hung it in my office where everyone could see. The stone the builder rejected has become the cornerstone. Every morning, I read those words and remember that rejection is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is the beginning of something greater than you can imagine. If you were in my position, would you have forgiven your father after everything he put you through, or would you have walked away and never looked back? I genuinely love to hear your thoughts, so please share them in the comments below. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so that you never miss another heartfelt story. Remember, your worth is not determined by those who reject you, but by the courage you have to raise above it. Until next time, take care and God bless you. Thank you.